Hello, everybody out there. I'm Bob Plankers, and this is vSphere Live, and where we talk about whatever, all kinds of different topics. Today, we're going to talk about designing systems and infrastructure and workloads and all that sort of stuff to defeat ransomware. Basically, how do we prevent it? How do we detect it? How do we stop it? That sort of thing. And joining me here, I've got two great fellows. Let's start with you, Dale. Who the heck are you, Dale?
Hey everybody, my name is Dale McKay. I'm a senior technical marketing architect. I work in the security business unit at VMware, and just happy to be here and help you out, Bob.
Excellent. Jerry, we've got a Jerry Haskins with us as well.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Haskins, and I'm a solution architect, and I'm in the Partner Solutions Engineering team, which is part of the Octo Office CTO here at VMware, and I work with on solutions with all of our partners.
Excellent. Yes. And yeah, I've been working with these guys for, quite a while now, doing writing papers, figuring solutions out, reference architectures, and all that stuff. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. We'll talk about all of that as we go. A couple of housekeeping things, not to be the YouTube streaming sort of guy, but I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. You know, the vSphere channel is great. You should subscribe to the Dale, does Security Business Unit have a YouTube?
Yes, we do. You can find it by searching for Carbon Black.
Carbon Black. Excellent. And so we'd appreciate a subscribe. And we do these live streams on the vSphere channel from time to time. I'm doing them every couple of weeks here. We've got a lot of topics to talk about. The next one will be July 18th. And I think I hadn't really decided what the topic was going to be. People are taking vacations in that. It's like it's summer in the Northern Hemisphere here, and everyone's bailing out on me. And so I thought maybe I'll do the next one solo. We'll do a live stream like we do like we do all of these and answer questions and that. But I'll talk about VMware, vSphere, VM encryption, virtual TPMs, native key provider and standard key providers, that sort of thing. There's a lot of questions, and I figure people can bring their questions and we can get them all answered. So that'll be July 18th. I think it's at 10 a.m. Pacific, but yeah, you'll see it pop up here. But that's all the maintenance I've got. I appreciate you. Actually, I lied. If you've got comments, questions, have live questions, we'd love to answer your live questions about ransomware and stuff like that. We'll take a shot at anything, of course, but ransomware and security and defending your infrastructures and workloads and that. Put them in the chat. Put them in on YouTube or wherever you're watching this, on Facebook. We're using a tool called StreamYard that aggregates them all so that we can see them. So if you put them there, if you notice we're not answering them right away, come on over to the YouTube side of things and ask it there, and we'll try to we'll get you squared away. But okay, now I'm done. Maintenance done and all that stuff. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about and ask these guys about, we'll just start at the beginning. Ransomware, what is it? And more appropriately, I guess there's a lot of misconceptions about what ransomware is. Dale, do you have anything that's a misconception that you hear a lot, or something that should get cleared up? Something come to mind?
I think probably one of the things that I would like to say is a mindset that I see in here is this inevitability that you are going to be attacked and hacked, and that ransomware is going to exist in your environment. I don't think it's an inevitability. And I think that that's maybe a wrong mindset that some of the industry writers and periodicals would have us believe, that it's not a matter of if, but when. And I don't know that I really subscribe to that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. That's a definite difference of opinion in the industry too, but, preparation helps too. What about you, Jerry? Anything that you think should get cleared up, or a misconception that you've heard and don't agree with?
Yeah, I think some people think there's always going to be a ransom. So ransomware sometimes doesn't have a ransom, right? They just are into defeating your systems and leaving them in a bad state where you can't get back into them. And there may not be a way to recover from that. Like, you may not be able to even pay a ransom, is what I'm saying. It's an attack that's done to just hurt you and your business, and there's no way to fix it other than to restore, recover from it, and in a method like we're going to talk about here today.
Yeah, well, and I agree with that. Well, and even if you do pay a ransom, evidence shows that basically if you do pay a ransom, you look like an ATM basically to a lot of these criminal groups. And so maybe they won't maybe the group that hit you the first time won't hit you again, but they'll tell their buddies about you, and give them the keys to all the back doors that they left. The other thing that sticks in my mind is that it's a criminal group. They really don't care about the decryption process. I think back to kind of what started the inflection point with all of this ransomware and zero trust and all that, the Colonial Pipeline hack back, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, on the East Coast of the US. And that they ended up restoring from backup anyhow, because the decryptor didn't work. It got to a gigabyte of restored data or decrypted data, and then it quit, and it was just a programming error, but these criminal groups don't care about it. They don't have a help desk you can call for the decryptor or anything. So, yeah.
And do you trust the decryptor in the end too? Could it just be doing
well,
worse?
That's the thing, like, again, criminal groups, they're stealing from you, So it's important to work with a group, an incident response group that's done work with ransomware groups before. And I think it's interesting that there's some ransomware groups that absolutely demand or insist that you don't use certain you don't contract with certain groups for incident response with ransomware because they just don't like them. They're too effective, that sort of thing. So
I think you kind of brought up an interesting point that maybe we want to draw a little bit of distinction around. That in my mind, there's really kind of two groups when you talk about ransomware. There's a nation state, which we don't always see them go to the ransomware stage. We see them more as electronic espionage, if you will. And then there's the criminal group. And the criminal group is obviously after the money.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of distinction that we need to make sure that we understand as we kind of walk through who's really susceptible and who to which group. I mean,
that's a really good point, because some of these groups, ransomware is hit and run. It's a really noisy end of a breach, and there's some of these criminal groups some of these groups that don't want that, and to Jerry's point, some of them just want that. They just want to be disruptive, and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of different groups, and they all have different motivations. That's really important. That's a good point. I mentioned zero trust. Hey Jerry, have you heard of this zero trust? This new fad, zero trust?
I have. I've looked at it quite a bit. Actually, wrote a paper on it even. But yeah, zero trust. In ransomware defense, those kind of somewhat go together a little bit. I don't think you have to be in zero trust to defend against ransomware necessarily.
Oh no.
But zero trust is kind of a theory that we're coming up with of more than it is a reality. I think in a lot of ways, I think you can start to get certain things, certain applications you're doing, certain ways that you authenticate to be zero trust like, but we're a long ways. And I think that all a company can really do is work towards that, but it's going to be hard to completely get there. If something's not written for zero trust, it's hard to make it zero trust, right?
So you're saying we can't just buy a zero trust from Dale here? We can't ask the security guys for, can I have 3 zero trusts and a Coke?
Yeah,
no,
there's
sir,
not going to be some automation thing where you can just create zero trust. I don't think through some, magical automation that somebody says they can put on your network. So it's really kind of a journey more than it is a destination. I think you're gonna be on it for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a journey, and you may implement zero trust in one aspect, and I think the organizations that do that should applaud themselves for accomplishing that. But then the next thing that you want to be asking yourself is, where do I go next?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
and unfortunately, there is no easy button to this. It requires quite a bit of research, quite a bit of planning to just even understand where to start. You know, my advice to people who try and start down this zero trust journey is to take something that you know intimately well in your environment and apply a zero trust policy to that, whether that's login, whether that's communications, whatever it's going to be, and experience what it's like to move into that zero trust mindset and framework.
Well, you might find that your users don't like it that much too, like this,
I don't like it that much sometimes. When it happens to me, you get caught where you're entering your password 4 times and you have to go to like an RSA key or something like that. And it can be annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you try logging into, you have to log fully into it again. There's the idea of single sign-on sometimes is dead. So, is there a balance there? Maybe you don't. I don't know, and this is the thing about security is always context dependent. It depends on the organization and appetite for risk and all kinds of stuff. And so, but Dale, you kind of segued nicely into, kind of what we want to talk about here. What is VMware doing about ransomware? You see these news articles and that like, and it's fun to mention VMware and all that stuff. And we don't tend to respond to, we get a lot of questions like, what's VMware doing about this news article saying that like, Lockbit runs on ESXi or these ransomware toolkits? Well, yeah, and these organizations, these threat actors basically have figured out that, vSphere runs a lot of important workloads. And so, we get asked then, what are we doing about the articles? And we generally don't comment on ransomware itself, like we try not to give people attention like that. Yeah, it happened. There's all these different groups and stuff like that. We don't want to help them publicize, PT Barnum, there's no such thing as bad publicity. We kind of believe that too. And, but also, I know we do a lot of stuff in our products to help deal with ransomware, and there's a sort of aspect, there's a couple of different aspects, there's workloads, what we can do for workloads, what we can do for infrastructure is a little different, and then there's also the prevention side of things and then the cure side of things, how do you prevent stuff, and so I want to talk a little bit about the things that we have published. The three of us worked on a paper not that long ago here. We have a ransomware resource center here, if you guys don't mind me adding it here. The ransomware resource center on core.vmware.com, where we've got a whole bunch of stuff about ransomware and things, it's ever changing. Our latest paper is ransomware defense and recovery strategies. And the first paper we wrote, designing infrastructure to defeat ransomware too. And we can talk both about these. Do you guys have a preference where we want to go first? Or we want to talk about, well, I guess the title of the stream is designing to defeat infrastructure. Why don't we go there first?
Yeah, I guess one of the first things that I would like to bring up is this whole concept of visibility. And I was out at a lot of the VMUG user cons earlier in the year, and I did a presentation on XDR, and this isn't going to be a presentation on XDR, but I started that presentation off by just asking people. I'm going to ask you a simple question, and you give me the answer relative to your environment. Can you monitor traffic between 2 VMs on the same ESX host?
Most organizations, probably can't.
Some people can, and some people can't.
Yeah.
If you can't see that traffic between those 2 VMs, then we need to stop any conversation that you're having about zero trust or anything else until you are at that point that you can see that traffic. Because that blind spot in today's environment, the way we have virtualized everything, until you can eliminate that blind spot, be able to see that traffic, be able to control it or to put controls around that traffic, it's almost, I don't want to say it's meaningless, but you're certainly working uphill to accomplish what you want to accomplish, Bob.
Yeah, and it's not even a virtualization thing. I mean, look at traffic inside of a VLAN on the backside of a firewall, for example. Once
Right.
you're in, the problem with firewalls is you have to punch holes in them to have applications. You know, if these pesky
Right.
users would go away, security would be really easy, right? You know, but you hack the application, you get into a workload, and then you're behind the firewall. You know, and you can do whatever you want because you're in, right? You know, Jerry, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, one way to look at that is that really what traffic are you allowing to just float around your network, though, right? If you're not limiting that to just what's needed, and then you're going to have more issues. If I can sit and scan, through thousands of ports on your network, and they're open, that's not a good thing, right? It should be pretty limited to specific applications, and then getting directly to that application, and not necessarily being able to go other directions with that same port. If that port's not needed open, on a certain segment of my network, then it shouldn't be open.
Yeah.
That's basic ACLs right there, right? In some ways, right? But making it smarter, like NSX can do it, takes it further than that, right? So an ACL, if you can defeat an ACL pretty easily by changing how you're attacking it, or what IP you're coming from, what IP you're going to, right? Those tend to be things, or MAC addresses. But if you look at the way NSX can do it, it can do it by a rule that will follow the VM or follow the workload wherever it goes. So, things like that can really help to defeat workarounds to get around port closures and stuff. So.
Yeah, but that's part of that zero trust idea too, like instead of, IT being one big happy family, a corporate network being one big happy family, why do we trust desktops? Why can anybody's desktop in an organization get to the management interface on ESXi, for example? And usually there aren't good answers to that.
Yeah, again, going back to some of these talks that I gave, my next question after I ask you, could you see that traffic between the two VMs on the ESX host, is on those VMs, can you monitor activity at the process level? If you can't see that, if you don't have that degree of visibility, then again, you're working uphill to achieve what it is that you need to achieve.
Yeah.
And
information is really
yeah, this really isn't a product specific kind of webinar that we're doing.
No.
But no matter whose products you're using, if you can't monitor your endpoints, and I don't just mean endpoints as in laptops, PCs, I mean endpoints anywhere that you have a monitoring presence, including workloads. If you can't monitor that at a process level, then you need to move to that posture where you're able to see that at the process level. Because by the time you see the network traffic that we're talking about, let's say that you are running some type of network detection, by the time you see the bad traffic, your endpoints have already been compromised. You need to see that compromise happening at the endpoint and be able to quarantine those endpoints off to prevent that traffic from ever getting to your network. So, those are two key points that I would like people as they listen to this webinar and really think through where is a foundational security posture. It's, can I see the traffic between two VMs on an ESX host? And can I see process level activity on those VMs?
I think another posture, though, to take too is that, like, even if you can get to my workload, is it secured enough that it doesn't matter, right? So
right.
Yeah.
If you're going to hit my server, what if you can't attack it? Then it's not going to be a problem for me, right? Now
Right.
you never want them to get there even, but if I can make sure that I'm looking at the headers as they're coming in for what kind of traffic is trying to say, talk to my web server, right? I'm not just allowing anything on 443 to pass. I'm also looking at that traffic and making sure that it's a real request. That's that in and of itself can really stop a lot of problems too.
Yeah, but you saying that just made me think of the adage that, that defenders have to be on their game 100% of the time, and attackers only need to get lucky once, right?
Right.
Correct.
And defending against the world of the attacker, like that's tough, and so what Dale is saying, the ability to have visibility into things, be able to detect. I mean, the NIST cyber security framework, detect, like number one thing there, and the ability to see things that are going wrong, see traffic, have traffic, and see traffic that really shouldn't be there, and be able to sort that out. Is it just an errant system? Is it some misinformed person in my organization? Or is it an attacker on a desktop somewhere that's pivoting and trying to gain access to things inside the network, And
it's smart monitoring too. Like one thing I talked about in my zero trust paper is the AVI IWAF, right? So it's an intelligent WAF, so it's able to learn the more it sees, and depending on how paranoid you are, you could have it start shutting down traffic the second it starts to see irregularities. But it learns the longer it's seeing traffic, and starts to see regular traffic versus
cool.
weird traffic.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about that. We've got, so this is a diagram from the Designing Infrastructure to Defeat Ransomware paper. And that's out on core.vmware.com. And by the way, people who are watching, thank you very much. If you've got questions about security, ransomware, any of that stuff, what VMware is doing, we're just talking about stuff here. Put them out in the chat, put them out, ask the question, and we will answer them live here. But in the meantime, let's talk about one of these papers. This is a diagram, kind of a complicated diagram. And sorry, here we can zoom in on certain things or whatever, but a diagram from the paper. And
this is consolidated, right? This looks like
this one is the separated one where there's separate. Do you want the consolidated one?
Well, no, I'm only seeing.
Oh, maybe I grabbed the right.
Yeah,
the wrong
that looks
one
like
here.
the consolidated. Yeah.
Okay. But
we can talk through this though too.
Yeah,
I prefer. I guess
this.
This is our method. Consolidated is what you do when you can't afford to be isolated, right? So and basically here we're still trying to keep our workloads and our vCenters separated, keeping all of our workloads. Here we're using NSX to isolate those workloads, and then we're keeping our vCenter and everything else, or all of our management control plane, we're keeping that separated on a separate switch and network inside of the data center. So we also don't ever allow the traffic to pass through directly to layer 3 inside the data center in this diagram. So it comes directly in, stays layer 2 through the switch, but then goes layer 3 only at NSX. So NSX talks to directly to our firewall, which I think in this I have an SD-WAN firewall in there. So that allows the traffic to come directly into the data center, even through the SD-WAN from the public breakout switch there. So we have separate routes for our LAN traffic in and out of the site, and then separate traffics for anything going to the data center. So we can have different rules, and then even between our corporate LAN traffic and our data center traffic, we're also have a firewall there that's isolating that. But then it also then goes through a second layer when it goes into NSX and has to pass through the NSX firewalls also.
Hey, speaking of NSX, we have a question. IT Systems Admin is asking, does NSX possibly replace an antivirus software by not installing AV agents on the virtual machines? Dale, I think this is right in your wheelhouse. You want to speak to this at all?
Yeah, so NSX is a pretty powerful tool, and it does have a lot of great network detection capabilities. But if we go back to that comment I made about being able to see at the process level, NSX is not going to show you that visibility at the process level at the endpoints. It really comes back to this phrase that we have used, and I think it's still very relevant in today's environment, no defense in depth.
Yeah.
It is really about layering in multiple defenses, not just endpoints, but endpoint, network, perimeter, whether that's a hard perimeter or a software-defined perimeter. It really does come down to visibility and providing that visibility so that you know where you're being probed and attacked.
Well, and being able to see if force an attacker to make an error.
Yes.
Can you set it up so that an attacker, when they try to do something or make an assumption about your environment, they tripwires or cause monitoring events to happen, something that you're going to see,
right?
And then being able to do something about that. So dead on, man. So
Yeah.
good question. So thanks, IT Systems Admin. Here, I'll put this back in here. Jerry, what else do you want to talk about in this diagram? Actually, I've got a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So management vSAN, vMotion, VLANs. You and I have talked at length in the past about separating these. You and I are old school. We like separating these. Can you go into why?
Well, so some of that stuff like vSAN traffic, if we keep that layer 2, it can't route, right? So
true.
There's no possible route to that unless you can get on that VLAN. So unless your switches get compromised in some way and somebody can directly attach to that VLAN, you're going to keep that traffic safe. And vMotion really, if it's not going to leave the data center, meaning we're not going to vMotion to another site or another location, that can actually stay isolated the same way. It doesn't need to route either. So those are good ways to just keep any of that traffic so it can't be sniffed in any way. There's no layer 3 north-south traffic that can go. The only thing it's doing is east and west on its only layer 2 VLAN, so it stays very safe there. And that's why I tend to do that. And then, isolating any of your management traffic to where, preferably, the best way would be to actually only have a jump box or something like that inside of your data center that can reach that management traffic. So again, like you talked about, you don't want anybody on the corporate network really, able to get to any of your management interfaces directly inside the data center.
That's and the jump box. I've always disliked jump boxes. I actually, in the past, have used VPNs, but same difference, right?
Same sort of thing. What I'm talking about, you VPN in or
VPNing into your own data center is weird, but
I've done that
it's a
before
control
too.
point. It's a great control point.
Yep,
So.
I've done that also, where I've done a VPN server inside the data center, but that also then connects your machine directly into the data center, which is out on the LAN network, right? So
and in the past,
it would be VPN and then have to still go to a jump box or something like that, right? Inside of it.
And in the past, we've used managed VMs out on those workstations that'll connect into the things. It can get really complicated. Jump boxes can be simple though too. And
I tend to, when I do jump boxes too, another way I'll keep it kind of unusual through my firewalls is I'll have it do a NAT that's like changes ports. So maybe on the outside I'm connected on 1001 to that. So I'll do RDP. I'm doing that, but I'll add the port to it. So it's not on a normal RDP scan port. You'd have to know the port that I'm connecting onto. It's not a perfect thing, but that's another layer of something that somebody has to figure out, right?
It forces an error, right? Like a lot of people, including myself, would label this as security through obscurity. The idea of hiding something is not really security. But somebody pointed out not that long ago that keys are really just security through obscurity. A key in a lock, for example. And so it works to a certain extent. And it helps forces the attackers to make an error. It's just, to Dale's points here, like you need to be watching for those errors. You need to have some way to detect them.
So if we rewind this conversation all the way back to the first question that you asked me, and I said, I don't believe that there's an inevitability that you're going to be the one that's in the ransomware spotlight. And I think maybe some people may have said, no, that guy's wrong. Here's why I really said that, and this kind of is that point that you're making right now, Bob, is if I can make my environment tougher, the majority of people who want to break in are going to go somewhere else. I liken them to the criminal that's going around checking for open car doors.
Yeah.
And I don't know about your neighborhoods, but lately we've kind of had a rash of that. People have caught people on camera late at night going up and trying to see what car doors are open. The car doors that don't open, the criminal moves on until he finds one that does open. And I think that this kind of applies here also. Now, I know people are going to say, no,
if you're
that's
not in that
right.
category,
Advanced
you know,
persistent threat.
you had also
Advanced
mentioned that there's
persistent
different
threat
types
is
of
not
threats.
this conversation. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not, you know, if you're somebody who has an advanced persistent threat, I don't know if I can say that like that, but
Yeah.
you might be in a little bit different category. The majority of people who are not in that advanced persistent threat category, if you can make your environment tougher so that when a bad guy comes and rattles your doorknob and finds that it's not unlocked, he says, I'm going to go somewhere else and try and find something easier, then you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish.
Yeah. But, you know, and it's hard. Sometimes security is kind of an art, you know, like how do you match up the amount of security you need versus the threats you face, you know, and that's really the tricky part with a lot of this stuff. And, you know, especially around designing an environment, because adding security, security is always a trade-off, you know, it's context dependent and it always trades something off. And a lot of that time it's budget, it's staff time, which is just kind of a form of budget, you know, like, you know, how far is too far, that sort of thing. So, hey, we've got a question here, not to derail it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's also a realistic risk conversation that needs to be had across the business, not just with IT, but really across the business.
So we've got a question coming in. Is there a way to avoid running non-VMware signed code on vSphere in a way that's very difficult to revert, like the exec installed only, but better? So exec installed only, here, let me promote that into the stream here. The exec installed only is a parameter that is available in vSphere 7, but it's really only starting to be used in earnest in vSphere 8. It's on by default. If you try to shut it off in vSphere 8, you will get an undismissible warning. You know, speaking of visibility, you know, like we want people to know that there's something happening here. Somebody's trying to load something on your host. Something bad is going on here. You know, it's a clue. The running non-VMware signed code on vSphere. So everything in the vSphere ecosystem, if you've got your host image profile acceptance level, yes, VMware, we are sometimes not good at naming things. The host image profile acceptance level set to partner or higher, that'll be code that's signed and countersigned by VMware as part of the partner programs. The community supported means that any code can run on ESXi, and you probably don't want that anymore, you know. And so if you've got it set to partner or higher, and if you've got a trusted platform module, a TPM 2.0 installed on your host and enabled, and by default, when you get servers, you order servers from Dell or HPE or whoever, they don't come configured with, the TPM is not configured the way ESXi would like it, by the way. So always check that. But if you've got it enabled in that, you will have protection such that you can only disable, you can only change, you can't put it back in community supported there, so you can't run unsigned code, and you can't shut those protections off without rebooting the host. And so that's an improvement. We're also looking at ways to make it even harder, you know, going forward. Part of it's the ecosystem. Partners, as part of vSphere 8, partners have had to make sure that all their code is signed and things like that. And so that's been a process, and it's our partner ecosystem has been very good about doing that. So I hope that's a good answer. You know, like as you go, you know, this is part of why I always advocate patching too, as part of protections against things, because we make improvements all along the way here, you know, and a lot of those improvements we actually don't talk about in many ways. They're just in the product and trying to deny attackers the ability to use some of these techniques. Here, we've got one more question, then we can get back to some of our stuff here. Let's see. We've got, and thank you, Luis. That was a good question. TX Eric, I suspect Texas Eric here. What do you recommend for admin root password management with 20 VCSAs and 600 plus hosts? A utility such as Microsoft Laps. I'm not quite sure what Laps is. I'm not a big Microsoft guy.
I think LDAPs, or what's that? Maybe
no, I think it's I don't know. It's the the admin password. So, oh, it's the admin password. So, local admin password solution.
Local admin password service. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Eric. The digging deep in my memory here. I just came back from vacation. I'm going to use that as an excuse. And we've only found one solution using Power CLI and KeyPass. I just suggest setting them all to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, and it makes it a lot easier.
Super easy then. No problem.
Super easy. You know, like easy
And
for
that's
you.
the last of the great security tips by Bob Plankers.
Yeah, you know, like Jerry, do you have any suggestions for Eric here in the group?
So let me read. What are they trying to figure out? Like how they can secure their without using groups or something like that, and setting it up to be
so
part of.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with a local admin password solution or whatever, but you know, I know there's a lot of organizations that use CyberArks and the HashiCorp vaults and of the world and that, and all of that. And all those passwords can be rotated and managed through APIs. And so a lot of organizations will use those tools to check out a password, do their thing, and then when they check it back in or the timer runs out or however they're configured, will automatically reset them. You know, have you heard of anything else though, guys?
So, actually, maybe it's a good time for me to throw you a question, Bob. And I know that what the answer is going to be, and that's why I'm throwing this question. There's probably some people out there who say, well, let's just integrate it with AD and that will manage your passwords. You want to make some comments on that?
I did want to get to AD. In fact, Jerry mentioned it yesterday when we were talking about this, you know, because in our papers, one of the things that we liked covering were a lot of the little things to think about, you know, like, and that make a big difference in security. And Active Directory, we had a lot of conversations about Active Directory. And actually, I'm going to kick this over to Jerry. Jerry, what do you think about using Active Directory for?
Well, don't use your domain admin account to manage your vCenter.
Agreed.
Right. You know? Let's not do that. So, and then you're going to be, and I know this isn't realistic all the time, but it'd be better to add single users into managing a vCenter than creating groups and dropping groups in there.
Yeah.
If you're going to do groups though, again, you'd want to separate those a lot around the different vCenters they manage. And then I would say, again, using separate accounts if you're going to do that. I don't really like the idea of groups, using just a group to drop somebody in there, but I think it's better just to add users to it. And specifically for your admins, I would also recommend just creating an account that's just for doing that type of a specific service. So
that's old school advice, Jerry.
It is old school advice, but this is stuff. But even for managing vCenter or any of your control plane, I don't recommend using your corporate vCenter for that. I mean, your corporate AD. I think you should carve off a separate one if that's how you're going to do it, and you're going to manage because you want to manage accounts. What we show in our infrastructure paper is having a separate AD for your control plane that has no kind of trust to your corporate in any way, so that if anything's getting compromised over on your corporate side, it's not getting compromised over on your infrastructure side. So your workloads and your desktops have nothing to do with your infrastructure AD. That's something I would keep separate completely.
Just
I agree.
One thing I want to note here when we're talking about visibility, we talked about endpoint visibility, we talked about network visibility. You've got to have identity visibility. Ideally, you would have all that in one tool, and that's really what XDR is about. That's certainly what our XDR platform is about. But having that identity so that you can understand the context, Bob, you said it a couple of times, and that's really what we're talking about here. If I have a compromised AD account that's being used and I can readily see that in the tool and I can follow that traffic that is caused by that compromised account, it makes it very easy for me to defend against that because of that visibility. So just just wanted to add that identity is really also,
you know, and the more information you have, the farther along in the process you can skip to, right? You know, like when you're diagnosing something, when you think there's a problem, that sort of thing. But I don't.
But even if I dive a little deeper into AD, and I'm not a micro, it's been a long
and
time
I think you might go where I was going to go here. Go for it.
But there's group policies are important too. The default sets of AD are really pretty open, and as far as group policies go. So if you apply those, you can apply accounts on an account, what machines they can log into. People don't bother doing that, right? If you don't want an account to be able to go searching around your network, you pretty much can isolate it to what it can log into. So those kind of tools you can use in AD to lock it down. I would suggest really learning group policies if you're going to use it, and how to really lock down all your accounts to specific tasks rather than, default AD, because it's too open.
Yeah. Well, and I want to add to that the reason why Active Directory is a little dangerous, and one, the way we see a lot of VMware customers compromise is through AD. Attackers, humans are going to do their thing. They're going to click on something. I always joke, if you see me talk live, I'll hold up my phone, and the older I get, the farther my phone gets from my face. Those, the APT groups that are registering bank website URL or domains that have like the Cyrillic A instead of the Anglo-Saxon English A, in there. Unicode is great for international stuff. It's terrible in the sense that you can make a lot of URLs that look the same but really aren't from a machine readable perspective. And somebody's going to click on one of those things. I've clicked on those things and gone, what the heck, and then I've been thankful all my machines are patched, that sort of thing. But and so somebody's going to do that. Humans are there's always trouble, like you say, don't click on links in email, and then your HR department, the next email in your inbox is an HR email that's got links in it to click on, and so it's there because it's convenient. So somebody's going to click on something bad. The desktop is going to become compromised. That user account's going to become compromised. And now they can get into Active Directory. They've got a login, an Active Directory domain user, and they can often use that. To your point, Jerry, that AD by default is pretty open. They can use that, and they can use tools. Bloodhound AD is a really interesting tool. It's open source that you can peruse permission models and stuff like that in an Active Directory. You might people watching might want to take a look at that and see what they can see in their own Active Directories. But you can find permission problems, and you don't even need full domain admin. But domain admins, by the way, are fully trusted. If you're using your AD for both authentication and authorization, your domain admins are implicitly trusted by everything. They're super users among super users above everything in your organization. Do you really want that? But you don't even need to be domain admin to change the permissions in a group. There's lesser permission levels that you need to do. And so if you're using that group, the attacker can come along and drop themselves into the VMware admins, the ubiquitous VMware admins group, and it's game over. Or firewall admins group, and then again, game over, because they can just log in, they can shut off security controls and all that stuff. And this is not hypothetical. This is real stuff. So one, I want to get back. Thank you, Eric, for the question. Sorry, we don't have a great answer, but automation, using an automation tool, a lot of the password vaulting schemes have those automation capabilities and can call APIs, and we support a lot of that stuff now. Two, we've got some other questions. Any plan to support MFA and Azure Active Directory? Yeah, stay tuned. Can't talk about it right now, but I will say that vSphere follows a particular release model. There's, a GA ever since vSphere 6 or so. There's been a GA release and then 3 update releases, and update 1, and they're about 6 months apart. And so the GA for vSphere 8 was in October of last year, and update 1 was about 6 months later in April. And so there might be an update 2, which you should keep your eye on. Just not saying, I don't know who you are and where you got your information from, but just saying, like that sort of thing. So, and tiered access rules and AD sort this out with the issue, but everyone hates you for doing it. Here, let's.
Tiered access rules and AD sort this out with an issue that everyone hates you for doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think this just speaks to usability, like you can, some security measures are just misery for the admins themselves, you know, and so that makes sense.
Well, and that's the mistake people make sometimes, is that you're trying to make your life easier, and by making your life easier as an admin, you create a security risk sometimes, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you do that by making it more complicated too. You know, sometimes
Sure.
the easier security option is the better one. You know, because it's more understandable.
It's true.
So, Eric has got. They do use AD as an identity source. The concern is a hacker getting root access and us avoiding the compromise of all VCSAs and hosts. Yeah. So.
It is
well.
Manage.
Yeah, I know. I agree. You know, and that is the concern. You don't want hackers getting in behind your defensive lines. So
I guess I would ask on that though, are they using a separate AD, or are they using their corporate AD? Like, managing that on a separate AD creates a lot less ability for a hacker to get into it, right?
Yeah, and I would even add that there are no good solutions here. You know, like local admin accounts. If you can do that, you know, that's great and all that stuff, but you know, monitoring it and logging all that stuff, that becomes cumbersome.
Or people are going to end up using the same account with the same password on every vCent, probably. You know, how are they going to get? That's hard to manage. Yeah, that's hard to manage.
Mark is commenting too that T0 in the tiered access roles, T0 would be hosts, domain controllers, standard stuff, that sort of thing. So yeah, that makes sense. You know, even if it does end up being kind of miserable sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's see. Good comment, Mark. Thank you. David has got interesting advice on how to avoid. Here, let me promote it. Here, interesting advice on how to avoid using AD groups. For decades, our practice was not to use individual accounts for access via the vSphere client. Well, what a lot of organizations are doing too, they have to use their organizational AD. You know, that's a much bigger change to get through, but they can stop using the group. They can break them up, and they can just use the administrators, the vSphere administrators SSO group instead. Just add the individuals into that and add those admin specific, you know, don't add plankers, which I log into my desktop as.
And don't add your domain admin.
Yeah.
Account.
Well,
you know, account that you use for that, right? That's
force the error, because if they break into my desktop, they're going to try these credentials and other things. Force them to make a login failure, you know, because we can see those sorts of things.
And remember, those credentials are sitting right in memory. This again goes back to one of the early things I said. You need to be able to see if someone is doing a memory scrape, trying to pull that information off of an endpoint. You know, a lot of people don't realize that once you have entered those credentials, they're sitting there available to anybody who can go and look at them. So make sure that you can see if that is being done.
I'll throw another one in there. When I generally create an admin for myself, it's not Jerry admin or anything like that. I might be all of a sudden Fred H, or you know what I mean? Just something random that I know it is. But so that again creates another problem. You can't find, what am I using to log into the vCenter? What am I using to log into my domain controllers, right? Don't put my name in it. My username's only for my desktop generally, right? That's it.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's a way to force an error, you know, because a lot of organizations, if they're monitoring, they monitor for failed logins. But if you've got somebody's credentials, it's not going to be a failed login, right? It's going to be a successful login.
Correct.
And that's really troublesome right there, you know, like, and that's the hard part. So
yeah, that's why you need that identity context that we kind of talked about briefly. It's like, okay, we know Plankers is logging in, but well, why is he logging in at 3 a.m.
from Guam? You know, like when I'm sitting in southern Wisconsin, you know,
exactly.
Like, what the heck, you know?
Yep.
So 3 a.m. might not actually be surprising given my sleep schedules, but the location might be, you know, and so
absolutely.
And you're starting to see that. And actually, one of the things we were talking a little bit about Azure AD here, you know, one of the things that VMware's goals with vSphere identity is actually to kind of get out of the identity business, you know, like to back off of the stuff and just federate. Let infrastructure that's built to do identity and just federate with it. You know, the Azure ADs, the Oktas that was introduced in 8 Update 1, Ping coming as well in the future, all that sort of stuff. You know, let the ADFS, everybody loves to hate ADFS, but it's a nice flexible way to plug in a bunch of different stuff. Duo, we can work with Duo, all of that stuff. And, let those things deal with the identity stuff, because they're really good at detecting what you're talking about, Dale. That Bob guy is logging in from somewhere really weird and, and flagging it. But again, it's not a panacea. There's been stuff in the news. I think it was Uber actually last fall that, multi-factor authentication, basically the attackers were spamming MFA requests at an engineer in the middle of the night, and without thinking about it, he just hit the yes button to make his phone shut up. And so again, humans are going to human. And I don't fault that guy at all. It's going to happen. Mark is noting conditional access is really good for controlling access on location machine is controlled. So so identity is huge. We've talked about perimeter controls and things like that. Jerry, I wanted to make the joke here too. I didn't see a line between your management, and I think this is just a problem with your diagram here. There's no line between management here and the internet. Did you,
Oh yeah, I was going to put it directly on there, but I decided not to this time. But yeah,
you decided not to this time. That's probably good. I don't know if you folks are familiar with Shodan.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Go
what?
there.
Where you
go right there. Yep.
I don't know if you've ever played with Shodan, but Shodan shows you a lot of stuff that it probably shouldn't know about it. Let's see, 34,546 things identifying as ESXi on the internet. Not having a firewall definitely means working from home is easier. It's easier to get to this stuff. The attackers thank you as well, and so please, defense in depth. I don't know which one of you two mentioned it, Dale, perhaps, but defense in depth, so important, to have an extra layer of something there. So,
well, how many people too run their ESXi hosts in lockdown mode, right?
Not nearly as many as probably should. And that's one of the things, the security configuration guide that I maintain for vSphere. I'm actually putting the name hardening back in it as well. It's configuration and hardening guide. The definitely recommends it. And there's a couple of different levels of lockdown mode. There's strict lockdown mode, which is pretty serious and has operational considerations. And then there's just normal lockdown mode, which is just it's a little bit more friction for an attacker, and so, doing stuff like that, really important. What else are we not talking about here? We talked about Active Directory. We talked about some microsegmentation, and Dale, you didn't get heavily into microsegmentation, but NSX and the ability to watch traffic that's just moving between VMs.
Yeah,
that's really key, and especially to be able to manage that traffic in a flexible way, and that's the thing about microsegmentation, is it can really cause an exponential or a logarithmic, I guess everything's exponential, but logarithmic growth in rules, firewall rules, and you need a way to manage it, but you can do that really flexibly. Let's see, we talked about we didn't talk about dependencies too much.
Backup and recovery.
Pardon me, Jerry?
Backup and recovery, maybe, if you are in that
go for it.
Immutable backups, make sure that they can't be changed once you've done the backup. Encryption, obviously, too, in your backups, making sure they're and then I guess what we do offer with VCDR is the ability to fix a backup. So don't just trust your backups either, because they could have the ransomware in them. Ransomware can go on for quite some time on your network before it actually is activated, right? So you could be backing up ransom machines for a period of time. So keeping long periods of backups is really a retention time, right? How long you retention should be as long as you possibly can is my opinion. Well,
that's a really good point. That IBM study that's out there that says that the average breach that ends in ransomware, the average length of a breach is 341 days. I know some folks in the InfoSec community look at that study and go, what? But some of these are really long, and it gets back to Dale's point early on that, there's different motivations for a lot of these these threats. Some threats don't want to disrupt your operation. They want to steal your intellectual property. They want to implant things. Maybe you're a software developer. They want to implant things in your software, SolarWinds style, and and so the motivations. In fact, the recent Mandiant wrote a paper recently about watching APT groups a Chinese APT that breaking into stuff or whatever that their blog post was released at the same time as an update to VMware Tools. That update to VMware Tools was classified, it has a low CVSS score. But, in context, if you're worried, it's basically a reverse VM escape. If you're worried about people implanting stuff, not just ransomware, but people being able to implant things in a VM, in a workload, that's the concerning part for a lot of organizations, and why there's a lot of organizations, even though it's a low score, taking it very seriously, and that's good. So.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing I'd throw in on backup and recovery is don't make your backup and recovery dependent on your vSphere environment or your whole environment there, right? So if I'm trying to restore that, excuse me, I can't be dependent on it, right? Because it's chicken and the egg problem, right? If it's not there, I can't get to it and I can't restore it. So make it independent if you can.
Yeah, being able to target. All incidents are different. I've done a lot of incident response in my previous life, and all incidents are different. Some of them are really big and weird, and having the ability to be flexible is really important. And that also goes for firewall rules too, like all of this isolation and all that stuff. How are you going to get in if there's a problem? You got to remember that too. And how do you make sure that back door isn't something an attacker can use too? So let's see, we've got some comments out here. YubiKeys for the win. A lot of people really like YubiKeys. I'm a bit ADHD and I live in fear of leaving my YubiKey somewhere. I don't know. It's just, forgetting it. David is commenting that lockdown mode turned it off very quickly, and he did elaborate that it depends on how often you need to log into the host directly for troubleshooting, and that's true, but you can also script this stuff too. So you can script the enablement and disablement of these sorts of things. And then he's also longing for the vSphere management assistant. That was really handy if you have to deal with hundreds of hosts. PowerCLI, a for loop or a for each loop in PowerCLI or PowerShell, and PowerCLI is a really powerful thing as well. I'm using the word power a lot. So,
is this a good place for VMware code plug?
Oh yeah, maybe. VMware code.vmware.com and developer.vmware.com. Here, let's see what code.vmware.com. I think it redirects to developer.vmware.com. Yeah. But all of our APIs, PowerCLI is so helpful, and it's so easy to install. You can just run that command and install it. And if you're looking for examples, here, let's go back to the security configuration guide. I've got this blown up here. The security configuration guide has all kinds of PowerCLI examples in it that if you want to learn how to do this stuff, you can do that. There's a great community around PowerCLI as well, and it's a great way to audit and do a lot of work there. So yeah, good idea, Dale. Let's see, what else do we have here? Immutable backups are helpful. Gerald is commenting. Immutable backups are helpful as well regarding the hiding ransomware.
That's what I mentioned, though. If they're immutable, they could be immutable with the ransomware in them, right?
You need to be able to restore them and not be vulnerable again, And, also visibility, if you restore something from backup, being able to catch it back up to current state, like even if you restore a non-ransomware and like a workload that's not infected by anything, but you're just going to restore it to a state from 2 weeks ago or something, it might not have the latest patches on it, might not have the latest security changes. Do you have a configuration management system? Do you have a way to replay everything that you've done to those hosts in the last 2 weeks or last month or whatever it is to make sure that they're up to the current state, and that's tricky, that's a bigger topic, so.
Another thing I throw in the network design is don't let your out-of-band network be accessible from your desktops either. That's another, just like your management network, anything else, those should be really hard to get access to, jump through a lot of hoops to get access to those, probably going to, like, again, a different VM that's hosted somewhere else within your infrastructure that can get access to those.
Yeah,
So.
there's well, and out of band things like the iDRAX and the ILOs and things like that. Not those are great tools, absolutely great tools. HPE, I've been looking at some of the HPE stuff lately. In fact, with you guys, looking at some of the security stuff that they have around their ILOs and that, and it's really great, you know. But they also can introduce backdoors, you know, those USB virtual NICs that they can create. Yeah. But vSphere 8, you can actually shut those off on vSphere, and we have that in the security configuration guide now too. So we're getting kind of to the end here, and this has gone longer than I thought it would, and that's great. This has been a great conversation. Let's wrap up here. You know, Dale, do you have any thoughts that we didn't get to? Parting comments? Sage?
Nope. I think I would wrap up defense in depth, visibility, context. Those are the 3 areas that you need to focus on.
Yep, I like those. I like those a lot. Defense in depth, especially. So, Jerry, what are your parting thoughts for us?
I mean, I think again, points I've made. You know, isolate. Don't use the same passwords everywhere. Don't use same accounts everywhere. And I think one thing I didn't bring up is even between sites. You know, creating some kind of a way, if you're going to do cross-site connections, make sure that traffic's encrypted also, that you're not, you know, don't leave your WAN connections, you know, unencrypted just because you think, well, I'm buying WAN links between my sites. They should be good. Encrypt that traffic too, you know.
No, those are good points. And in the past too, I've talked about the more sites you have, remember that, you know, a VPN connection between 2 sites goes both ways, right? You know, like, and so anything that's up in the cloud, if it's got a trusted connection back to your on-premises data center or wherever, you know, that can be used by an attacker to go both directions there. And so don't assume. And I think that's the heart of the zero trust stuff that we were talking about. You know, just that, you know, start questioning things, ask questions, don't assume. You know, ask yourself how this could go wrong. You know, how could somebody use this to break in? You know, and that's a really interesting mindset. But and I'll leave it there. All your
eggs in one basket. That'd be my other last thing too. Spread your workloads across multiple things so that if you lose one part of your infrastructure, it's not over for you. You have other things that might still be working that can help you recover what you need to recover.
InfoSec is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? The CIA triad, and availability is huge. So, gentlemen, it's been a blast having you on here. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who has commented. Mark has a comment in here about the Terraform has got a vSphere provider, which is cool. And David's commenting that looked into the scripted enable disable lockdown mode thingy. The spreadsheet that is a security configuration guide has got how to enable, disable it. Well, it has how to enable it, but you can just flip it around to disabled. Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. So thank you all. And yeah, you know, again, the next one of these, July 18th, we'll be talking about VM encryption. I'll probably just be doing it myself, do a presentation on VM encryption and VTPMs, native key providers, and all of that stuff. Lots of questions around that, a lot of interest in that as another way to do security and compliance related things. And so we'll talk about that then. Please come and join us. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the videos where you're at. So thank you very much. Thank you, Eric, as well. And yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Bye now.